You're listening to the Poetry Cove Radio, the world's leading poetry radio station.
So, this collection of poetry spans an entire decade and follows your 20s. This passage of time and your evolution as a poet is intentionally highlighted to be part of the narrative itself. Even the name, The Early Hours, is a reference to the beginning years of your career as a writer, and this book is made to showcase your progression as a poet over time. I'd like to take a moment now to play the titular poem, The Early Hours.
Let not the leaves of first summer fall in vain. Let not the bud's beauty wilt before its blooming spectacle. Let not blue skies juvenile cloud over before an August rain, nor burn too soon the work of lame Hephaestus. Unexceptional anviled chassis, the basis of Apollo's pruning. Chiron on the winding road leading through the gated abbey. And now the winter turns to spring, seeds become our stalks. Dion sleeps on a bed of stone, draped in petals freshly plucked. Noon has risen to shine her beauty and bid adieu to the morning dew. Her loving rays give birth and warms away the fresh and welcoming of these early hours.
Now, a person's 20s are a very formative time in someone's life, and most people leave them a completely different version of themselves than they came in with, or at least I'd hope so. As you were putting this collection together, what was it like going back and rereading earlier work that you've forgotten about?
It was difficult. I'm not going to lie to you, it was difficult. This whole book is supposed to be a celebration of the journey we go on as poets. I'm completely self-taught. When I first started out, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to express, and I know that there's a lot of poets out there that's like that. And of course, now I do YouTube and I review a lot of collections, and whether that's traditionally published collections or self-published collections, and so basically I'm a lot better read than I was back then, and I've learnt a lot more than I had back then. But as I say, I've read some collections and thought, wow, that's really not great. And I've read some other self-published collections and thought, wow, I really need to up my game. And so that's kind of what The Early Hours is about. It's about realizing my journey as a poet, looking back at who I was then and the style of poet I was then and who I am now, having come on this journey. But the main message of this is to not be embarrassed about having had to start from somewhere. Everyone's got to start from somewhere. Everyone's got to be a beginner. This is about embracing that and celebrating that. And it was difficult to do that whilst reading back some of the older stuff, because it was quite embarrassing, and it needed some reworking, and it was difficult. It was difficult to keep the motivation up, because when I was reading certain pieces, I just thought, oh man, it's just not great at all. But thankfully I stuck to it, and I remembered the whole message behind this book, and I kept going. And I'm just, yeah, it was difficult at times, but I'm glad I kept going, because I'm proud of what The Early Hours has become. And now I have this collection where I can, in 10 years time or whatever, I can again look back and think, oh man, this was the early works. The Early Hours actually started out titled as The Early Works, until you turned around and said, oh, that's not a good title. Or I can't remember what you said, but your point was valid, so I changed it to The Early Hours. Actually, I think you changed it to The Early Hours.
Yeah,
you suggested The Early Hours, so thank you for that, because I love the title now.
Thank you. And I think a lot of poets have a sort of kill your darlings attitude to their earlier work, so I really admire how you're not afraid to show it, even though it may be difficult or, like you've said, embarrassing at times.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was definitely moments when I did feel like kill your darlings. I did think, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to let this die. But no, I'm glad I stuck to it, because I think it's an important message to send out to newer poets. You know, don't be embarrassed of where you've come from, I guess.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. And before we move on to the next question, I just want to play another one of your poems, and this one is titled As I Lay Here.
Sure.
You're listening to the Poetry Cove Radio, the world's leading poetry radio station.